WWE Hall of Famer Ric Flair reacts to Hulk Hogan death news. Ric Flair spoke with TMZ about Hulk Hogan in the minutes after the wrestling legend's death, and he got super emotional remembering his good friend. He was more than a friend, he was family. WWE legend Ric Flair breaks down in tears reacting to the tragic news of Hulk Hogan's death in an emotional interview with TMZ. This raw and heartfelt moment will leave you speechless. In this powerful video, we take you inside Ric Flair's emotional response just minutes after hearing the devastating news about the passing of his longtime friend and wrestling brother, Hulk Hogan. As two icons of pro wrestling history, their bond went far beyond the ring, and Flair's tribute is a reminder of just how real their connection was. He was more than a friend, he was family. Those were Ric Flair's first words. Shaky. Breathless. Spoken through tears to a TMZ reporter who had just broken the worst news imaginable. Hulk Hogan, real name Terry Bollea, was gone. At 71 years old, the icon who once told millions to train, say their prayers, and believe in themselves, was no longer with us. A legend silenced by cardiac arrest. And the world of professional wrestling stood still, but no one felt it like Ric Flair. It had only been minutes since the world learned of Hogan's death. The wrestling community was scrambling for statements, reactions, tributes. But Ric didn't need a press team or a polished quote. He didn't need time to collect himself. Because there are some losses that time can't prepare you for. TMZ's camera clicked on. Ric stood there, eyes hollow, hands trembling, lips dry from grief. At first, he said nothing. Just silence, an unbearable pause that felt like an eternity. He looked down at the ground, then back up. He was more than a friend, he began, voice cracking, he was my brother. And then the tears came. For decades, they were the twin towers of professional wrestling. Hulk Hogan, the heroic megastar with unmatched charisma, and Ric Flair, the styling, profiling, limousine-riding icon with the gold belts to prove it. Together, they weren't just characters. They were culture. They were history, but behind the robes, behind the bandanas, behind the blinding lights and roaring crowds, there was a real friendship. One built on blood, sweat, loss, and loyalty. And now, Flair, alone, was left to carry that torch. He took a long breath, one that looked like it hurt. I don't think I've cried this hard in years, he whispered. Not since Dusty. Not since Reed. The camera zoomed slightly closer. His eyes were red. Glassy. The nature boy, the man who survived a plane crash, the man who came back from near death himself, was falling apart in real time. But it wasn't just grief, it was guilt. You could see it written all over his face. Like maybe he'd missed a call. Or didn't get to say goodbye. He turned to the reporter, gently shaking his head. You always think there's time. But there isn't. Then, he reached into his coat pocket. Not for a tissue. Not for his phone. But for a folded photograph. It was old. Creased. A picture of him and Hogan, laughing in the back of an arena locker room, shirts off, arms over each other's shoulders, championship belts draped across their laps like war trophies. They looked immortal in that photo. Two kings. Untouchable. But time catches up to even the immortals. Ric stared at it like it was all he had left. We weren't supposed to get old, he muttered. We weren't supposed to die. As the wrestling world flooded social media with tributes, memories, and highlight reels, Ric Flair wasn't posting. He was pacing. In a hotel hallway. Alone. Phone off. Eyes swollen, because his grief wasn't content for clicks. It was real. He paused again in the interview, running a hand over his slicked back hair, then pressing his fingers against his eyes. I talked to him last week, he said softly. He told me he felt tired. I said, brother, you've carried this business on your back for 40 years, you've earned rest. Then Ric paused again. Looked up at the camera. But I didn't know it would be forever. He turned away for a moment. The camera shook slightly, following him as he stepped toward a wall and braced his arm against it. You could hear him choking back sobs, the kind of cry that only comes when you've lost someone who knew you before the fame, before the pain, before the world crowned you royalty. And for Rick, Hogan was that person. They weren't just co-workers. They weren't just rivals. They were survivors. Through the steroid scandals, the injuries, the divorces, the betrayals, the lawsuits, these two stood tall. They watched the business rise, fall, rise again. They watched as the world changed. As their friends dropped like flies. As their own bodies betrayed them. I used to be scared of dying, Flair said quietly, turning back toward the camera. But now I'm just scared of living without the ones I love. There was a moment of stillness, then the reporter asked, "What would you want people to remember about Hulk Hogan?" Rick didn't even hesitate. That he gave more than he ever took. That he made kids believe in heroes. That he wasn't perfect, but damn it, he tried. And in this world? That's everything. A pause. The camera caught a single tear tracing down his cheek. He'd give you the shirt off his back. And then he'd tear it off and make you laugh while he did it. The corner of Rick's lip curled into a soft, tired smile. It was the first time he smiled since the camera started rolling. And it only lasted a second, because then the smile faded. And he whispered, almost to himself, "I should have told him I loved him more." Behind Rick, a television in the hotel lobby was playing old footage. WrestleMania 3. The Silverdome. 93,000 fans on their feet. Hulk Hogan body slamming Andre the Giant. The camera slowly panned toward the TV, the echo of the crowd faintly playing in the background, and Rick, he just stared. "Wrestling lost its heartbeat today," he said. "And I lost my brother." Fade to black voiceover, gentle and solemn, in loving memory of Hulk Hogan. 1953 to 2025. You made the world believe in heroes. Cut to archival footage of Hogan and Flair embracing in the ring, both older now, graying, but smiling. As if time had no power over the bond they shared. Then, one last frame, Ric Flair, standing alone in a dark hallway, looking up, eyes full of tears, fists clenched by his side, and the words appear in silence, "Wah." A sound once shouted in celebration, now whispered, in mourning. The silence after Ric Flair's tribute was deafening. But only for a moment, because when news of Hulk Hogan's death swept across locker rooms, green rooms, arenas, and households around the world, there was a sudden wave of shock. And then, heartbreak. WWE headquarters lowered the flag outside its Stamford offices. For once, the politics of wrestling paused. The rivalries, the feuds, the egos, they all stopped. Because when someone like Hulk Hogan dies, it's not just a loss. It's a collapse. A piece of the very foundation crumbles beneath you, and that's exactly how it felt to those who shared the ring with him. John Cena was one of the first to respond. The man often called the Hogan of his generation didn't need to say much. A single post. No filters. No PR polish. Just a photo. Cena and Hogan backstage at WrestleMania 30, arms locked, sweat-soaked, and smiling like brothers. Under it, 6 words, "Thank you for showing me how." Then silence, because grief doesn't always need an essay. Sometimes, the silence says more elsewhere. Randy Orton, normally reserved in interviews, broke during a podcast taping scheduled just hours after the news broke. They were mid-discussion about current storylines when the host paused and showed Orton the notification on his phone. The room fell still. Orton read it. Then slowly removed his headset. "You're kidding," he said. "Tell me that's not real." But it was. And for the next 10 minutes, he just sat in silence. Eventually, he whispered, "He helped my dad, you know? Backstage in the 80s. When my dad was getting lost in the shuffle, Hogan pulled him in. Said, 'That man's got something.' He didn't have to do that. But he did. That's who Hulk was." Tears welled up in his eyes. And now he's gone. In Florida, at the Performance Center, where WWE's Next Generation trains day in and day out, a moment of silence was observed before practice began. The room, usually echoing with bumps, slams, and yelling, stood eerily quiet. Some of the youngest wrestlers had only known Hogan through VHS tapes or action figures. But they knew. They knew, because Hulk Hogan was wrestling, not just a wrestler. Wrestling itself. Shawn Michaels, the Heartbreak Kid, issued a statement through his representative. But the rawness leaked through every line. We fought. We laughed. We clashed. And through it all, I respected him more than words could ever say. Hulk Hogan was the son of this industry, too bright to ignore, too powerful to touch. Today, the light feels dimmer. And my heart is shattered. Meanwhile, backstage at Monday Night Raw, the show still had to go on. The crowd was electric, but the energy was different. Everyone had heard. The news had broken just before the taping. Superstars scrambled to rewrite their segments. Producers rushed through whispers and handshakes. But the cameras didn't catch what happened backstage. A circle formed. Roman Reigns, Seth Rollins, Sami Zayn, Cody Rhodes. All huddled together, heads bowed. Paul Heyman, holding back emotion, led the group in a quiet reflection. Hogan paved the road we walk, he said. Every step we take in this business, we take because he cleared the jungle first. Never forget that. Then, he stepped aside. I and the production truck, Kevin Dunn, one of WWE's most senior TV producers, quietly instructed a live team to prepare a tribute package. He didn't need direction. He knew. Footage was pulled. From 1984 to 2024. Body slams. Leg drops. The red and yellow. WrestleMania moments. That unforgettable theme music, I Am a Real American, blaring through arenas like a national anthem for fans who never cared about borders. In Stamford, Vince McMahon, no longer active, but still a looming presence, released a rare, deeply personal statement. There would be no global WWE without Hulk Hogan. He wasn't just the face of the company. He was the soul of an era. Terry was complicated. He was imperfect. But he was mine. And I loved him like a son. The statement ended with 3 words, "Thank you, brother." Across the country, fans gathered. Some placed action figures, bandanas, and photos outside arenas. Some stood silently outside Hulk Hogan's beach shop in Clearwater, Florida, candles flickering in the ocean breeze. Others flooded social media with memories, videos, and stories of how Hogan had made them believe in something bigger, stronger, when they needed it most. But for Ric Flair, the grieving didn't end after the TMZ interview. Later that night, he returned home. Alone. He walked into his office, walls lined with belts, memorabilia, and decades of photos. But one photo sat different. It wasn't framed. Just resting quietly on his desk. A Polaroid from 1985. Hogan and Flair. Not in the ring. Not on a poster. But on a beach in Florida. Shirtless, barefoot, sunburned, and laughing like kids. No fans. No scripts. Just 2 men who survived something together. Rick sat in silence. Then, without warning, he reached for his phone. Not to text. Not to scroll. But to record. His voice, quiet and low, cracked with age and emotion. To the fans out there, I know you're hurting. I am too. We all are. But I need you to know something. Hulk Hogan loved you. Every single one of you. Even the ones who booed him. Even the ones who turned on him during the NWO. You were always in his heart. He wiped his face. He told me once, "Brother, when they cheer, I feel 10 feet tall. When they boo, I feel 20. That was his power. He didn't just live for the reaction, he became the reason for it. Flair took a long breath. I don't know if I'll ever lace up my boots again. Not after this. But if I do, it'll be for him. He hit stop. The video was never posted, because some tributes aren't meant to go viral, some are just meant to be said aloud. In a room full of memories. By morning, WWE had officially announced a 10-bell salute to open the next SmackDown. Rumors swirled that Hogan's family was already in discussions about a Hall of Fame tribute, one that would be broadcast live from Tampa, the city he loved. But Ric Flair? He didn't attend the press calls. He didn't fly out for TV. He stayed home. With that photo and the words that no one ever wants to say, "Goodbye, brother." The air in Tampa felt different that night. There was a weight to it. A stillness that even 20,000 screaming fans couldn't shake. It wasn't just another SmackDown. It wasn't just another tribute. This was a farewell. WWE had transformed Amalie Arena into a shrine for a man larger than life. Banners of Hulk Hogan, arms flexed, shades on, smile blazing, hung from the rafters like sacred relics. The ring apron was black, trimmed in gold. The mat bore a simple message in bold white letters, "Thank you, Hulk." As the broadcast began, the crowd stood in silence. The bell tolled 10 times. Slowly. Mournfully. Each chime echoed like thunder rolling across history. From the first clang to the last, no one moved. No one breathed, and when the final toll faded into silence, the screen faded to black. Then, "Real American." The crowd erupted, not with joy, but with something deeper, gratitude. The music played louder than ever before. Every fan in the building stood, fists in the air, tears in their eyes, chanting his name as if their voices could reach wherever Hogan was now. Hogan! 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 Backstage, WWE legends gathered, shoulder to shoulder in solidarity. Stone Cold Steve Austin, Trish Stratus, Booker T, Lita, Shawn Michaels, JBL, Randy Orton, even The Undertaker. The entire locker room had flown in. No storyline. No angles. No gimmicks, just love. Triple H stood in the ring, microphone in hand. But for a long moment, he couldn't speak. He looked around, at the sea of fans, the tribute banners, the faces of peers who had grown up idolizing Hogan. His jaw clenched, then he whispered, "He was the first hero I ever had." The crowd roared, "He was the reason I picked up a weight. The reason I stepped into a gym. The reason I believed that maybe, just maybe, I could become something more." He paused, voice shaking. "And tonight, we don't just mourn him. We celebrate him." Then came the tribute package. A 6-minute masterpiece. Years of footage, grainy VHS to 4K Ultra HD, stitched together like scripture. WrestleMania 3. The leg drop. The finger wag. The red and yellow. The NWO heel turn. The return in 2002. Hulk Hogan vs. The Rock. The crowd reaction that shook the earth, and over it all, Hogan's own voice, "You know something, brother? I love you guys. I always have. I always will. And I hope when I'm gone, you remember one thing. I did it all for the fans." The final shot, Hogan on the ramp, shirt torn, arms wide, fireworks behind him. He turns around, and vanishes into the smoke. Back to Triple H, tears in his eyes. "He wasn't perfect," he said. "But he was real. He was ours. And he never stopped being that." One by one, wrestlers came out, not to perform, but to pay respect. John Cena stood at the top of the ramp, saluted, and whispered, "Rest easy, champ." Roman Reigns came out, holding both championship belts. He placed them in the center of the ring, then knelt beside them. Even The Rock appeared, via satellite from a film set overseas. "You don't get wrestling without Hogan. Period," The Rock said, eyes misting over. "He made it global. He made it cool. He made it matter. I was lucky to stand across from him in that ring. And even luckier to hug him backstage after. My heart is with his family. And my soul is with the man who told us all to believe." But there was one more moment left, and it didn't come from a superstar. It came from the fans. WWE gave the floor to them. A pre-recorded segment aired of everyday fans from around the world, finishing the same line, "Hulk Hogan made me believe that anything was possible. That heroes are real. That strength comes from heart. That I could beat cancer. That I mattered." Then, in a surprise no one expected, Ric Flair returned to the ring. He hadn't planned it. Hadn't told anyone. But as the final fan voice faded, the crowd turned, and there he was. In a simple black suit. No pyro. No robe, just Rick. The arena went silent. Not out of respect, but awe. They watched as the man who could barely speak through tears days ago now stood tall, in front of the same crowd that once watched him and Hogan tear the house down. He lifted the mic slowly and said just 5 words, "What you gonna do, brother?" The crowd gasped, "When heaven runs wild on you." An explosion of cheers. Rick smiled through his tears. He pointed to the sky. "I'll see you again, Terry. And when I do, you better have that bandana ready. 'Cause we got one more match in us." Then, he dropped the mic. The crowd chanted his name, "Ric. Rick. Rick." As he walked away, WWE faded to black. No outro. No commentary, just one screen. Black background. White text, "In memory of Hulk Hogan. 1953 to 2025. Then one final message, "Heroes live forever." And that night, every fan in the world believed it. They came with bandanas, with tears, with Sharpies and candles and action figures they hadn't touched in years. Outside WWE arenas across the country, from Tampa to Los Angeles, from Chicago to London, fans gathered by the thousands, not because they were told to, but because their hearts pulled them there. This wasn't just a celebrity passing. This was the death of a cultural force. Hulk Hogan was more than a wrestler. He was a father figure. A symbol. A titan of youth. He was your childhood, strutting down the ramp in red and yellow, finger wagging at the villains of the world. And now, that flame had gone out. At WWE's Performance Center, a makeshift shrine appeared overnight. By dawn, it had grown tenfold. Photos, signed posters, wristbands, old VHS tapes. A pair of tattered yellow boots, and a cardboard sign, hand-scrawled with black marker, "I survived because Hogan gave me strength." One fan, 34-year-old Marcus from Houston, flew to Tampa with his 7-year-old son. He spoke through tears. "I had cancer when I was 9. I used to watch Hogan in the hospital every morning. He was my superhero. When I got better, my dad took me to see him live. It's the only memory I have of my father before he died." He looked down at his son, who wore a replica Hulk Rules shirt. "I needed to show my boy who saved his grandpa's life." The stories didn't stop. At a fan memorial in Brooklyn, a woman named Jada held up a Polaroid from 1991, her, age 5, sitting on Hulk Hogan's shoulders at a charity event. On the back, it simply read, "He made me feel seen." In Glasgow, Scotland, a full bagpipe tribute was held on Buchanan Street. Dozens of fans, most of them never having seen Hogan live, stood in silence as the pipes played "Real American" with reverence. In Tokyo, a mural went up overnight. Hogan's likeness, painted in bold brushstrokes across a concrete wall in Shibuya. Beneath it, the words, "Fight Forever." And in Mexico City, lucha legends paid tribute in the only way they knew how, through action. An entire card was rewritten in Hogan's honor. Every match ended with a Hogan pose. Every winner dropped to one knee and pointed skyward. But the tributes didn't stop with fans. AEW, Impact Wrestling, NJPW, even UFC, they all issued public statements. AEW's Tony Khan opened Dynamite with a message rarely heard in wrestling. "Tonight, we remember Hulk Hogan, not as a rival, but as a legend who paved the way for all of us. Without him, there is no wrestling boom. No Monday Night Wars. No future. Tonight, we're not two companies, we're one wrestling family." That night's main event ended with every AEW wrestler coming to the ramp, lifting their hands in the air, and shouting, "Whatcha gonna do, brother?" It was a moment that transcended brand loyalty. Over at UFC, Dana White opened Fight Night with a custom video package highlighting Hogan's influence on the crossover between wrestling and MMA. Conor McGregor even posted a rare, unfiltered tribute. He made fighting feel like mythology. RIP to the legend. Meanwhile, back in Tampa, the Hogan family, his children, his wife, his brother, remained largely silent, grieving privately. But one post did surface. A photo of Hogan's hand, lying peacefully in a hospital bed, his signature bandana wrapped around his wrist, and one caption, "He died with a smile on his face. You were his world." Then came the moment the world didn't expect. WWE announced a global Hulk Hogan memorial show live from Madison Square Garden, not just a tribute match. Not a segment. An entire night dedicated to Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair. He asked for one last thing, to be the one to say goodbye. The request was approved. As MSG sold out in record time, fans across the globe braced for the most emotional event in wrestling history. But behind the curtain, behind the glamour and pyro and posters, Flair sat alone. A week had passed since the TMZ interview. A week of shaking hands, wiping tears, hearing stories, but nothing could prepare him for this final send-off. A camera caught him backstage, sitting on a bench, eyes closed, bandana in one hand, and a prayer on his lips. He wasn't the nature boy tonight. He was just Rick, just Terry's friend. He opened his eyes, then slowly stood and walked toward the curtain. One last time the lights dimmed, the crowd stood, and then, silence. Madison Square Garden, the mecca of pro wrestling, the building where Hulk Hogan became immortal, now transformed into a cathedral of grief, gratitude, and gold. Every corner of the arena glowed in soft amber light. The Jumbotron, normally roaring with promos and pyrotechnics, faded into a black screen. One name appeared in glowing white letters: Hulk Hogan. 1953 to 2025. The fans didn't chant, they just wept. The ring was draped in red and yellow. A single spotlight fell on the center. There, on a velvet-draped pedestal, lay Hogan's boots. Laced, polished, untouched. Next to them, folded with care, was his bandana, and resting atop both, his iconic feathered boa. For several minutes, the arena remained silent. Then, softly, subtly, a familiar voice echoed through the speakers: "I am a real American." The crowd didn't erupt, they sang every word. Tens of thousands of voices, trembling but defiant, singing Hogan's anthem not in celebration, but in farewell. When the final note faded, the screen changed again. A montage began: raw, unfiltered, eternal. Hogan slamming Andre, Hogan hugging young fans, Hogan lifting Randy Savage's hand at WrestleMania, Hogan bowing to the crowd in Japan, Hogan, years older, dancing in the ring with his grandchildren. And finally, Hogan and Ric Flair embracing backstage after their last match together. The voiceover wasn't from WWE. It was Hogan himself, from a podcast. A long-forgotten quote that now felt like prophecy: "When I'm gone, brother, I don't want tears. I want cheers. I want people to know I gave them everything. The blood, the sweat, the leg drops. All of it. For them." Then, darkness. A single spotlight. Ric Flair entered. No robe. No theme. No fireworks. Just him. A man in a black suit with red trim. A trembling hand clutching a microphone. His walk slow, deliberate, weighted by decades of history. He stood in the center of the ring, paused, looked out at the fans, then looked up, and for a moment, Ric Flair said nothing, not because he didn't know what to say, but because everything had been said. His voice cracked as he began: "I've been in this business for 50 years. And I've buried a lot of brothers. But this one," he stopped. The crowd whispered, "Wuh." He nodded, smiling through tears. He would have loved that. Then, Rick turned his body to the pedestal, staring at the boots. "Terry Jean Bollea was my friend. My rival. My family. We fought in Tokyo, we fought in Vegas, we fought in Philly, and we fought at WrestleMania. But we always hugged after. Always." He paused, looking down. "You all saw the superhero. The muscles. The flexes. The leg drops. But I saw the man. I saw the guy who stayed up with me in a hospital room after my son passed. I saw the man who called me every single day after my coma. I saw the brother. And if you ask me what his greatest match was, it wasn't against Andre. It wasn't against Warrior. It wasn't against The Rock." He stepped forward. It was against time. A beat of silence. He kept fighting, even when he couldn't wrestle. He kept smiling, even when he was in pain. He kept being Hulk Hogan, even when the world told him to stop. And tonight, in this ring, in front of the fans he loved more than life itself, "I'm not gonna say goodbye." He pointed to the sky, "Because I know, somewhere up there, the lights are flashing, the pyro's going off, and Gorilla Monsoon is welcoming him to the main event. So brother, if you can hear me, he lowered the mic then, in the softest voice anyone had ever heard from Ric Flair, I love you. Always did. He turned to the pedestal, knelt and kissed the top of the bandana, then stood, took one last look around and shouted, what you gonna do when immortality runs wild on you? The crowd exploded, tears turned to applause, applause turned to chants, Hogan! 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 WWE superstars began filling the stage. Cena, Roman, Cody, Bianca, Orton, Miz, Logan Paul, LA Knight, Sami Zayn. Even Vince McMahon, gray and grave, stood in silence, and as the crowd chanted, something happened. Flair stepped outside the ring, removed his jacket, hung it over the ropes, and looked back one last time, because deep down, he knew this was his goodbye too. He walked up the ramp, the crowd parting for him like scripture, and just before disappearing behind the curtain, he turned around, raised his hand, and with a crack in his voice, gave the final woo of his career. The screen faded to black. No. #NOADS.NO upcoming event plugs, just 3 words, rest in power.